time to go fishing. I really should reline that. Just go over here and open up the line box and see what I got. Okay, let's see. Should I go braid? Wait, fluorocarbon, no. Mono? This should not be this hard. What the? Good enough. What's the best fishing line and why? Answering that question is going to be a lot harder than it may seem, because there's pros and cons to every type of fishing line you get, and there might be a fishing line maybe you haven't quite heard of. But today I'm going to try my best to go into depth on each one, why I have each one, pros and cons to each, and show you that some of the brands that I have, and try to somehow answer this question, if there even is an answer to that question at all. So in front of me I have 4 different types of fishing line. Now you may be saying, but there's only three main types of fishing line. Yes, but there are in fact 4. Right now, I really want to start off with the first and foremost, and that's the one that almost everyone uses, everyone knows, everyone probably has had this at some point in their life if they've ever cast a rod. And that is the simple fluorocarbon. It is a staple in most people's fishing line to go with fluorocarbon. It's usually the most common type of fishing line you'll see on the market. It's talked about more than most, and honestly it's a pretty good fishing line. However, here comes some of the cons before we go into the pros. Fluorocarbon is one of the more expensive lines. You can actually get into some brands that honestly can cost you $30 for almost 200 yards, which is absolutely insane to think about. It's also stiffer than most line, and it's really not beginner friendly with bait casters due to the fact that it has what is known as, it gains memory, and so it likes to bind up. If you let the spool get away from you just a little bit, it can backlash quite a bit. So I personally don't like it as a beginner's type of line just because of the downside of that. It is a pretty stiff line. There's very little to minimal stretch in fluorocarbon, and it can really help you out. I mean, there's practically no stretch with the fluorocarbon. It is, however, very abrasion resistant, which is what most people use around like rocks or extremely heavy cover. That's why I use it as leader line for the most part. But one of the biggest selling points of fluorocarbon is that it's virtually invisible in the water. You get in the super clear water, you can't see it. So if you're around really finicky fish, you want something that you can practically just see through in the water. It's not going to have a huge presentation, you're not going to see it, and it can really help with that. It does have better sensitivity on the line, so for those guys wondering about sensitivity, and like feeling the bites through the rod and feeling when your bait hits bottom. Fluorocarbon is really your middle ground between monofilament and braid. It's kind of the half and half on that one. That's why it's the most universally used fishing line. Just because of that, especially by people who are serious fishermen. This is usually the one we go with. Now, my personal favorite fishing line, and we'll go into why it's my favorite here, is braid. Now, for me, the reason that I personally fell in love with braid is because I picked it up one time at the store because I was watching Tactical Bassin and they had braid tied on, Power Pro. And I was like, okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pick up what line they tell me to grab, not really knowing the differences between any of them. And so I picked up some braid. And the cons to braid are as follows. One, it is one of the most expensive fishing lines on the market. This can really break your bank, especially if you get into the really expensive lines. You can pay pretty hefty amounts of money just for a good spool of fishing line. Another con is in clear water, it is very visible. You can stick your head underwater and you can see someone's fishing line coming down in front of you by 20 feet, you know? A lot of people, sometimes people say that it's difficult to tie knots with braid. I've never found that to be true at all, because I like tying knots with braid more because it doesn't bounce around and move when I'm trying to hold it. It's where I'm at and I'm holding it, and the end is going to flop down. I know where that's going to go, so I prefer braid. It doesn't have as much just how do I put this, sheer strength when it comes to just hitting it hard, right? It'll snap the knots pretty easy, but overall strength for the diameter of the line is the best out of all the fishing line. It's much thinner than the fluorocarbon or the mono of the same weight and test. So with that, you can get more line on your spool. You can really cast out there a lot further. And for me personally, it's always been a bit friendlier to beginners with bait casters because it doesn't have any memory and it's easier to cast out there further. And if you can make little mistakes, just slow and steady, you can always pick those backlashes out of there. Now, more of the pros, like I said, we got strength, thinness, and one of the biggest things on it that was a selling point for me is it's super sensitive, right? You know when you're on bottom, you know when something's bit your line, you know it. You feel it through the rod, it vibrates through all of it, and there is absolutely zero stretch with braid. Every little movement of your rod tip is going to vibrate through the entirety of your line going out to your bait. And for me, that is where I try to use as much of this as possible. And that's just my personal preference on it. So, my opinion, braid is king. Now, next, a fishing line that I don't use particularly that often, but there are times when it is appropriate and I do use it. I have 3 to 4 spools of this on my boat at any given time. And this is one of the highly debated types of fishing line compared to braid or whatever. And that is monofilament. Now, some of the cons with monofilament is there is a lot of stretch with monofilament. I mean, and a lot. You you can stretch this stuff out there quite a bit. You got to really set the hook on monofilament when you have it. Good. And that's where you get the videos of those guys setting the hook at 1,000,000 miles an hour, you know? And for me, I try to avoid all of that because I don't like setting the hook super hard. I don't like swinging for the fences every time I go to set a hook. That's how you snap rods. It's how you do all manner of stuff. How you slip fall because you missed a hook, or you send a bait flying way back past your head into your co-angler's face or whatever. So that's a no-go for me. The sensitivity on it is less than the other two options, which for me is also a big no-go. I'm not a fan. So it's one of those, I'm not a big fan, and this one has the worst memory out of all of them. You leave this on a spool for 3 or 4 weeks, and next thing you know, you go out to use your rod and it is molded to that shape. So it will stay there. Next time you cast it, it's backlashing on you, not going right. So you need to change it more often. Pros with monofilament, and this is why some people will gravitate towards this, is it's very cost effective. Very, very cost effective. It is the cheapest fishing line on the market. You're getting what you pay for, essentially. On the flip side of the stretch is also a shock absorber. So if you're trying to save hooks, if you're trying to go super hyper finesse, you can use this to avoid oversetting your hook and bending your hooks out. Very decent abrasion resistance. So it's really not that bad of a choice, especially if you're just wanting to get some decent fishing line and you need it easy. They are easy for knot tying purposes. They are fairly easy to tie knots in these, and they do hold the knots very well. So it's definitely worth there. And it is just a versatile, use it in all, be all fishing line. So that's monofilament. Now, this last one is a fishing line that some people may not have heard of, and this is called a copolymer fishing line. P-Line makes this. Now, I did not have this in 20 pound like the others, but it is in a 12. Now, this is a fishing line I don't use very often. It is usually on my boat. It stays there in case I need it, but it's not one of those I'm gonna pick up very common. If I need monofilament line or I need just cheap line I can use with good stretch, I'm gonna go with monofilament. So now this line is basically, it's a little stronger per diameter than mono. It's still got a little bit of stretch, but not a lot of stretch. It can take a beating more than most monofilaments from what I can tell. I don't know about knot tying wise, usually because honestly I just can't quantify knot tying with this because I haven't tied enough knots with it. It pretty much disappears in the water. Just about as good as the fluorocarbon. So those are the pros with this fishing line. Now the cons I have with this fishing line right here is it's more expensive than mono. That's for sure, but what you get is kind of like the half ground between fluorocarbon and mono. So I think at that point, if you're willing to spend the extra money, it's worth it. This one can definitely be destroyed quickly by being in the sun. So this is one you want to keep in a rod locker or a box of some kind. Keep it out of the sun. If your rods have it on there, try to keep them out of the sun. It'll make your line last longer. This line does sink extremely well. So that's a big one for some people, especially if they're trying to really get down deep. This is the line to go with because it does sink quite well. So out of all of them, which one is the best? Well, there is no answer for that. Unfortunately, you can watch millions and thousands of hours of video online and see all kinds of people talking about this line's better, this line's superior, this line's the best, this line's whatever. You know, it's all, from what I've discovered, that's all just personal preference, right? So I don't think there is such a thing as the best fishing line. Now when it comes to situations, like for me, most of the time I'm running braid. However, if I'm out there and I'm fishing around a dam and there's sharp, jagged rocks everywhere, I might just take some fluorocarbon, switch rods to a fluorocarbon rod, or go braid to leader with fluorocarbon. Happy medium. Or if I want kind of a middle ground slow fall, but with a bit more stretch on it, I'll switch to braid to monofilament leader. It gives me just enough shock absorption on the tip of the bait that I'm not quite going to bend out hooks. I still got to be careful because it's mainly braid, but it gives me that middle ground. And it still helps it sink and falls with the bait just a bit better. Now with the copolymer, that's kind of my middle ground there too. If I'm expecting to have both of those scenarios pop up, I might tie that on, which is pretty rare. But if I have both of those situations that I'm going to be focusing on fishing, I'm going to tie on the copolymer to a braid of the main line. So this also comes down to where and what you're fishing, right? If you're a saltwater fisherman or you're fishing for cat, something, your types of line are going to change on what you would like to do and what you would like to cast. It's not a hard set in stone, this is what you have to do, this is the big deal. No, it's not. So people can rant and rave up and down about, hey, this is the best fishing line on the planet, but there's no evidence to back up that it is other than conjecture, all right? Other than your personal opinion. And that's not what we're doing here. My personal opinions, I'm only using them to further a point or to make a statement. I'm not trying to shift anyone on here to one way or another. So if you did watch this far along, thank you. Hopefully you realize that just picking up your own line is the best for you. And in conclusion, there is no best fishing line. It's what you prefer. It's what you are comfortable fishing with, casting with, and your unique situation on the water. So thank you for watching. And remember, I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy learning.